So this is one of my favorite topics to engage in and discuss. I'm in the process of actually finishing a book on this topic, finally. And the book is called Original Skin, The Human Masquerade. And of course, original skin is meant to be a little bit of a play on words because it goes back to an important teaching which we'll start with. And some of you who've been obviously in class, who I am seeing on the screen as well, you know this teaching well, but I want you to see it also now in light of our discussion about masks. So there's a question that's raised in the book of Genesis, which is, what happened after Adam and Eve in the story eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? So just a quick comment from one of you to raise your hand. What does happen to Adam and Eve after they eat from the tree? I can call on you too. So Judy, you're smiling. And if you don't know the story or don't have an exact answer, we'll go to somebody else. But Judy, if you unmute yourself, do you have just a quick reflection on what happens to them?
Yeah, they recognize each other, recognize that they're nude, and I don't know, do they have sex sometime at some point? I don't know if that's immediate or not. They recognize each other's, their own nudity and each other's.
Right. And Judy, do you remember what the narrative says, that when they recognize that they are naked, what is their realization?
Yes, I don't know that.
They have an emotional response. Does anybody know what that is?
Shame? Is it shame?
Shame, right. They feel, so again, their nakedness is revealed, right? And they feel shame. Okay. Now, at the end of the story, before they get banished from the Garden of Eden, what do they wind up getting before they leave? They and maybe you haven't clued into this, but are you aware that they receive something before they leave the Garden of Eden? In the narrative, they receive something from God. What is it that they receive? It's not a map.
I'm going to say clothing, something to cover them.
Judy, you could just stay on for the rest of the class, and we could just keep going with you. So thank you.
I won't.
No, thank you, Judy. So they receive clothing. Let's see if anybody else knows something about this. What was the clothing that they received? What kind of clothing did they receive? And if you've been in class in Kabbalah, I would ask you to refrain so you're not giving it exactly away yet. What kind of clothing does God give them?
The only thing I can think of probably would be tree branches or tree leaves.
Okay, so Abby, guess what? It says first in the narrative that they sew for themselves clothing made out of fig leaves.
Okay, so leaves, yeah.
So that's why in all of Renaissance painting, we see Adam and Eve, basically naked, except that they're covered, certain parts of their body are covered with fig leaves. But God wants to give them a little more than that. I mean, you got to do laundry every so often, but they've got to have something that's going to protect them a little more when they leave the hermetically sealed, beautiful garden, and they're venturing out into this wide world. So God is going to give them some other form of clothing. So it's interesting, by the way, it does not specify what clothing they're given. The rabbis come up with all kinds of interesting ideas. Fur, rabbit fur, leather clothing, but all of the ideas. One even comes up with the idea that it was snake skin. But all of the ideas are similar in what regard? That they are what? Clothing that comes from some animal, right? Some even suggest clothing from flax, which would be cotton, right? Some kind of sheepskin or other things like that. Along comes the Zohar, which is the key text from Kabbalah, and comes up with an idea that is that actually cannot fit into the literal meaning of the verses in the Torah, but is a very powerful and interesting suggestion, and that is that the skin that God gave to Adam and Eve is this. In other words, the skin that covers our bodies is what they received from God. In a way, we could argue and say that they had already received it when they, as Judy pointed out, when they had eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they realized they were naked. Now, here's an interesting question. If after they eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they become human beings, what were they before that? So the Zohar says, I'll say, Henna.
So God made Adam in his image. So maybe Adam and Eve were some sort of mystical type humans, not really humans as we know them.
Beautiful, Henna. Can you imagine what that might look like? What that might be? Because Henna, that's exactly what the Zohar suggests. So a little sophisticated piece, and I probably should have prepared a slide for this, so I apologize, but the Hebrew word for skin is or. And the Hebrew word for light is or. One is spelled with the letter Aleph, the letter A, and the other is spelled with the letter Ayin, which is usually on my keyboard, it's the letter E. So there's a little play in a way on the difference between one or light and one or skin. So the way the Zohar describes it is that light, energy, turned into matter, skin. Are you following this teaching? At first, as Henna suggested, they were mystical beings, right? They were energy beings. And what did they transform into? God wasn't giving them clothing, right? God was giving what was enclothing them in physical form. All right? Now, this whole story is metaphoric. It doesn't mean to say that we can't also understand how humans evolved out of the entire, in the entire evolutionary system. But this is speaking to what makes us uniquely human. And it is that it's the lesson that we really need to learn about this is that we come into this world with many masks on. Let's start thinking about all of the masks that are covering us, that we come into the world with. Because it's not just our physical skin, right, which is a mask, but it is much more than that, right? We're wearing many, many masks. In class, when I ask people to list their masks, I have yet to have a student list their body as a mask. The closest they get is they list things like, oh, you mean a mask? Oh, well, you know, if I put makeup on, that's a mask. Or maybe the glasses that I wear are a mask. Or the color of my hair or the shape of my hair, that's a mask. But not one person in 15 years has yet to say my body. Now, when someone does, I'll give them credit, but they haven't yet done it. So we have to work hard then at understanding even the simplicity of that our physical selves, our body is a mask. So I would like input from a few of you. What other masks are we born with? Do we come into this world with? What are the masks are we wearing or wear us as we come into being a person?
Can I say something? I don't have a camera, so of course I can't raise my
Bianca,
hand.
I know exactly who you are. Your voice is distinctive. Go ahead, Bianca.
We have internal masks too, like pride and things like that.
Now, Bianca, I love your answer, but I'm going to challenge you. Do you think the infant comes into this world with a whole bunch of pride?
Not when they're born, of
Okay.
course. But
So good. So let's keep in mind Bianca's answer that we can develop many masks as we go through life and we have our experiences. Pride may be one of them. Of course, there's false pride, and there are things that we could certainly be proud of. Okay. However, those are things that develop. I'm asking, and Bianca, you can certainly add another answer to this, but what do we come in with that is mask?
How about gender?
All right. Offers gender as a mask. By the way, I can count on I'll have to say my two hands by now, because I've had a lot of students go through this, the people who suggest gender as a mask. Do you know, I'm sorry, Debbie, go ahead.
I was going to say skin color, race, ethnicity, relationship and family, like sibling or child.
All right, so now we're starting to multiply some other ideas. So along with gender, Debbie is now suggesting what? The color of your skin. We could add to that your ethnicity, right? Now, the reason that people don't think about gender and sometimes ethnicity or color of skin or the body as a mask is because they think that is who they are. Listen carefully to that. Why would they would ask, why are you calling that a mask? This is who I am. Okay, Judy, go ahead.
The first thing people ask about a baby is it a boy or a girl? So that I was almost going to say it before Gabe said it. Why is it a mask? Because it doesn't tell everything about who you are.
Judy, beautiful. Now, if we want to define anything as mask, because that mask doesn't tell everything about you, we're going to have a lot of masks. Would you agree with that supposition there, if we agree with what Judy just said? Okay. All right. So here's a shocker. How about all of the genetics that you come in with? Are your genetics who you are, or are they a mask? So if we go back to that story in Genesis, where energy is turning into physical matter, skin, you know, let's go back to something Bianca said. It's when we say skin, where if energy is forming into something, it's not just forming into skin, it's forming into kidneys and toenails, but it's also factoring into your eye color. If you're a redhead, if you are more oriented to think right-brained or left-brained, are you musical? Are you great at math? I just want you to see that in our already discussion, this is opening up for us a whole challenging level of inquiry and understanding, because what we really want to get at is, so who are we? And I also want to be clear about something. Just because you have many masks, and we're calling them masks, there is nothing negative about the word mask. And those masks are, in fact, a part of you. But if you're not aware that they are a mask, then they're wearing you and you're not wearing them. If you're not aware that they are a mask. So let's take a step back and let's talk about how we judge people, because this is a really helpful way to begin to understand the point of the study. How we judge people based on our perception of the mask that they're wearing. Where do you begin to see those kinds of judgments, either that you have been aware of yourself or that you see in society, on how people judge others by the mask that they see rather than who that person is?
The degree to which they're religious. Oh, he's Orthodox.
Okay, so Judy, that's a nice example, which is that you could look at someone and say, aha, because they're dressed a certain way or they present themselves in a certain way, that's who they are. And we could maybe judge them favorably or judge them negatively based on that.
Mhm.
Good example. By the way, Judy, is religion a mask? Is your religious,
Yes, I would say.
oh, do you know how much argument I've had about this one?
Would you agree?
Well, yes, of course I would agree. But that was a hard fought one for me. I grew up in a rabbi's home. Judaism did not feel like a mask to me. Judaism and being Jewish felt like who I was, who I am. The same would hold true for someone who grew up in a Buddhist home or in a Catholic home or a Hindu home. They might feel very attached to that identity, right? Eileen, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
What about your neshama? What about your heart? What kind of that? Your heart would be a mask as well.
Well, it's interesting because, and I hope you'll find this as a clever answer, a person undergoes a heart transplant. Did they all of a sudden become the other person? Now, by the way, scientifically, there are some interesting things that we have been suggested. Again, I'm not saying that these are proven facts, but anecdotally, I've heard these stories, and I've also read some stuff that some people who get transplants, such as a heart or other important organ donations, actually develop some of the preferences of the donor's life. I had a student once who got a bone marrow transplant, and although initially she was not allowed to find out who donated it, she then found out, and she was in contact with this man who donated his bone marrow, and he said to her jokingly, "Have you developed an interest in cornflakes for breakfast? Because that's my favorite breakfast." But Eileen, getting back to your point, you know, the heart is allowing us to live. But metaphorically, we now start talking about the heart as, more of the essence of who we are, right? Our deeper emotions, our love, our capacity to love. And then when we talk about neshama, our soul, what exactly is that? What is that soul? So back to Judy's point, I'm very proud of my ethnicity. I'm very proud of proclaiming that I am Jewish. And it is an extremely important mask that I wear that doesn't wear me. But for most of my young life, it wore me rather than I wearing it. Because I was not aware that it's a mask. Now, I want to get back to something that Judy said, kind of just as an aside point. When you start thinking about mask, can you begin to think about who you would be without that mask? Is there a layer that's deeper than that mask? So Gabriel mentioned the mask of gender. That's pretty fundamental to who you sense you are. And in this discussion, we're not saying to you, it's just a mask. No, it's an important mask. But what are you beyond your gender? What are you beyond your religion or ethnicity? Elaine?
I'm just wondering the roles we play in life. You
Mm-hmm.
know, a wife, a husband, a mother, a son, a daughter, you know, a grandchild, a granddaughter, whatever. Are
Yeah.
those masks?
So Debbie before had said, what about family relationships, right? You're born into a family, right? So all of those relationships, all the roles that we'll take on are certainly masks. And again, remember, there's nothing pejorative about the word mask. When we say the word mask, it doesn't mean that it's something you're hiding or covering up. It's just something that is hiding a part of you that's deeper than that. And remember, Elaine, that role that you have as a daughter or as a mother is constantly going to be evolving. Right? There's a point where, sometimes the child becomes the parent, right? And then they're acting in that role of what? They're still the daughter or the son, but they're acting in the role of parent to their parent. So that helps us to see why it's the roles are also a mask. By the way, here's a big one. There was a brief period of time. I'm trained as a psychologist. There was a brief period of time where I went into the business world for about 3 years. And people would say to me, they still call me doctor. And I say to them, why are you calling me doctor? I'm not being a doctor. So they would say, well, once a psychologist, always a psychologist. You think like a psychologist, right? This gets back to Eileen's point about soul or heart, right? Your thinking is a certain way. So I said, listen, I'm trying to become a businessman. I'm not trying to think as a psychologist at this point. It doesn't mean I'm not aware of those kinds of things that I think about. But people have a really hard time letting you let go of a previous identity. They still want to see you as who you were in their eyes. But our professions and whatever we do in this world is definitely mask. We got a lot of hands. Adrian first, and then Henna. And Adrian, you have to unmute yourself.
About the color of your skin. Is that a mask?
What do people think?
I think it is. I think if I was a different color, maybe I'd be thinking differently than who I am now.
There's no question that every mask that we wear or wears us has a profound impact on who we are, how we're perceived, right? How we're perceived by others, and how we are perceived by others has a deep impact on how we feel about ourselves. If a person with dark skin grows up in a community with all people who have dark skin, the mask of dark skin is not even going to be recognized or felt. But you have that person go into a society or community where they are different, then all of a sudden then that becomes a huge mask. I had a student who is a physician who went on a year's sabbatical to work in Africa. He was the only white person in the entire area. And he got to experience for the first time being a minority. It was a profound experience for him. But Adrian and others, if we are going to look at that, if we're going to look at skin color as a mask, we have to begin to then understand what? That there's something more fundamental, right? Let's go back to Adam and Eve. There are plenty of people who've wondered, what skin color were Adam and Eve? Again, this is a metaphor story, but what was the skin color of Adam and Eve? So we say, well, you know, or let's say they were black. Well, the story is helping us understand it doesn't matter so much what color their skin was, it's the transformation of energy into skin, whatever color that skin may be. What aura, by the way, that's the Hebrew word for light, right? An energy, or what aura is a dark-skinned person versus a light-skinned person? Or are you even paying attention to what energy is being seen by that person, whatever skin color they may be? But to Adrian's point, we are very judgmental when we see the surface, right? When we see the skin. Hannah, what did you want to ask or add?
I'm just thinking in terms of social media. So has social media removed masks because we can see what people are thinking, or because of the anonymity, has it added a layer of masking?
Well, first off, Hannah, I need to understand what you are thinking about when you say social media. When you say social media, to me, it brings up the recent documentary, which I think everyone it should be required. It's part of required human viewing, called the Social Dilemma, where we becoming aware that what social media does is it narrows what kinds of information come to you as Hannah, as opposed to what comes to me as David. And therefore, all the inputs from social media actually reinforce the mask of who I am. Because it doesn't show me the other possibilities of what else I could be looking at.
Because I'm finding, and I'm only on Facebook in terms of, I know there's a lot of others out there, but I'm finding that people that I have known for many years are posting things that absolutely surprised me, that I would not have thought this particular person would have said something like that.
Mm-hmm. So in that regard, Hannah, then for that example, social media is actually helping you to discover other masks that this person wears.
Yeah, absolutely. But
So
are they also now feeling free because they're not looking at somebody face to face to say things that they otherwise would not? So it's providing a mask for them that they can hide behind.
I think that that's a good point. But again, we have to be careful, because when people put costumes on or masks, it often frees them up to express other aspects of themselves. As the saying goes, a mask reveals as much as it conceals.
Yes.
So it's a good insight on your part that this kind of interaction can then allow people to reveal a little more about themselves. I would say to you, though, in the end, that social media and all of our technology is actually a bit of a challenge. The positive side of it is, you know, I get to interact now with people from around the world who I might not have ever had the opportunity to connect with. That's powerful in itself. But
Oh,
the
I agree.
challenge is that, you know, like seeing you on this little teeny square doesn't quite give me the full feel of, to go back to Eileen's, of your soul. So if we want to have soul connection, it really is so much more powerful if we have, you know, face-to-face kind of, you know, connections. But we have to look at both sides of the equation. All right. Other questions or comments up to this point? Yes, Rebecca.
Oh, sorry, I've got my dog barking in the backyard. When I listen to you, I think of my masks that come with a bias when I see the world. And when you speak, I also feel that the masks that we come into, whether it's through families, is an imposition. And with that term, imposition feels like a negative description. And then when you say there's masks, there's no positive or negative relationship to masks. How do we undo, you know, with an awareness of the masks we wear, how do we move forward and let the neshama, as Eileen said, our soul come out and our true masks be identified?
Okay, so when we say true masks, first of all, I think that we're talking about what we might consider to be our more authentic masks. Right? That this mask represents who I am, who I see myself as more authentically. So the first step actually in answering your question is that we have to have an awareness that these are masks. If I don't know that they're a mask, I don't know if I can work on that. And I have to be careful because that could be a rather powerful excuse, which is, I can't change. Now, there's another side to that, equally powerful, which is that we have to learn sometimes how to accept other people's masks. It may not mean that they can't change, but you know, it's not so easy to modify your genetics. Sometimes you just have to work within the constraints of the masks that you are born with. Doesn't mean you can't be proud of them, but you still have to deal with the masks that you are given. And sometimes in relationships, we have to learn how to accept the other people's masks. One of the big challenges we get into is we're insisting that other people let go of their masks, change them. Masks are a part of who we are, but we still have to see them as masks. So how do we then get to the deeper level, right? In other words, what may be beyond our, even beyond our authentic masks? What Eileen referred to as soul. So I would suggest to you that, first of all, there's enough work, it's a lifetime of work to really understand and appreciate the masks that you wear. There's a lot of spiritual growth available in recognizing all the masks that you wear. And it really is important to choose to wear masks that are certainly more authentic. Not the masks that were placed on you by family, by society, by circumstance. In that way, you develop a different relationship with the masks that you wear, so that your relationship is that you're wearing them and they're not wearing you. That's the key. Does anybody else have a question or comment about, in relationship to understanding the masks that we wear?
What about when we study different things, like whether it's for religious sake or for educational sake? I know you touched on this a little bit, but could it be that sometimes we can't think for ourselves because we are so used to saying, well, so and so says this and so says that, and we tend to be influenced by whoever that so and so is instead of thinking for ourselves?
So Bianca, that's an important mask that many people wear, although at least you have some recognition that I might be wearing it instead of it wearing me. So people who just follow a leader or listen without any thought themselves about challenging what it is that they're listening to, that's a mask that a lot of people wear. But a more authentic mask is, am I listening to that just because other people are listening to it, or because I am prone to listen to other people, what they have to say? Maybe I don't consider myself, smart enough to go through the same process and figure some of these things out myself. So Bianca, what you just described is a very common mask that people wear. We've got a lot of that going on right now in our United States of America. So you got to learn to think for yourself. And that's unmasking that I'm just listening to what other people have to say because they know more, or they're more authoritative, or whatever that might mean. Does that help, Bianca?
It helps, and I think it also goes back to the influence of social media and stuff too, because I've been finding that people are only hearing what they want to hear and not the truth. But then comes the question of what is really the truth, and it's coming to the point where people don't even know what the truth is anymore.
That is a new mask we have now discovered, which is the mask called, what am I supposed to believe?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to believe? And by the way, this has affected whether people wear masks during this COVID pandemic, you know, but there's masks underneath those masks, all right? Whether you're going to decide to wear a mask in itself may represent another mask, right? The mask of conformity, the mask of rebelliousness, the mask of not believing something, or the mask of believing something. So those are masks as well. You know, you have to really dig into and try to understand, once we start talking about masks, how far-reaching this concept goes about all of our participation in life. But what I want you to really focus, because the bigger lessons are really to challenge you about very important things about how we, you know, who we see ourselves as and what we see other people as. So I want to key you in to another beautiful little teaching, that the word for skin in Hebrew is, as I said before, or, but with an E, right? The or that's light is with an A sound. So aura in English comes from that Hebrew word or with the A sound, meaning light, and skin is with the E sound. That same word in Hebrew, or with the E sound, which means skin, is the exact same letters that are for the word in Hebrew that signifies someone who is blind. Now, why would someone who is blind share the same word as skin? Any insights that you might suggest based on that, what we've been talking about? The blind person is a skin person. Yes, Hannah.
Well, going back to where we started, that with the Adam and Eve story, they did not see each other as being uncovered, undressed, until they had the tree of knowledge where they could see.
Right. So listen to how we use the word. They were blind to what? When we say, oh yeah, you know, you're blind to this, what does that mean? It's not always a compliment, but, oh, you're blind to their faults, right? Judy, go ahead.
You say they're unimportant to you, or
Right.
you don't distinguish them.
But so it could be unimportant because it's not distinguished, or you're giving someone the benefit of the doubt because you're blind to their faults. So the blind person, first of all, is a skin person because in order to see you, they touch you. They're kinesthetic, right? So they're using their skin to touch you. And also in the old days, before we understood more about blindness, even the scientists, the medical profession, thought that blindness was caused by skin on the eye, like a film on the eye that would block their vision. But the more profound and deeper understanding of this is what? The blind person actually has more of a chance of seeing you as light and seeing your energy than seeing your skin. Because skin often is what? Skin is the thing that allows us to misperceive, right? The superficial level has us misperceive the deeper stuff of what's going on, the deeper person that is there. There are many stories told of blind people that they actually see more than the people who have sight. Our sight gives us a huge advantage.
I agree with that.
Okay, Bianca.
Because it even happens to me. I mean, being a blind person myself, I mean, there are a lot of things I can see in people, even if I can't physically see them.
Yes. So if you want a reference to, there are movies to this point, beautiful films. There's a autobiography by a fellow by the name of Jacques Luceron, a French author who wrote a book called And There Was Light. He became blind when he was only 8 years old. So he has the language of color to help us understand his experience as a blind person. So I want to, I'm hopeful that this sheds some light for you on shedding our relationship with masks. Now, the goal here is not to get rid of your masks. The goal here is actually to have an awareness of them, to know them well. Your mask of anger, your mask of sadness, your mask of aging. You got to deal with all the masks that you have. And then come to what? To an appreciation that, yes, they are certainly a part of you. Some of them have been a part of you since you've been born. Some you can modify. Some you have to accept. And yet you have to recognize that they are masks. So wear them and ensure that they're not wearing you, which means you're not even aware that they are there. All right. I hope this was something that brightened your Tuesday. Yes, Jane. Jane, if you can get to the computer.
There, I got it unmuted. So without the mask, you would be just an energy?
Well, first of all, you're not going to be just without your masks. You'll always have your masks. But yes, if you were unmasked, then all you would be is what we call energy or consciousness.
So before you're born, you're just energy or your consciousness, or you're
Yes.
nothing.
Yes.
Yes, what?
I agree with you. Before
I said you would be something or you'd be nothing.
No thing, which is different than nothing.
No what?
No thing. You're not a thing.
No thing.
Right. You are. We could still conceptualize you as something like an energy or a consciousness.
How does this fit into reincarnation?
Rebecca can invite me back to discuss reincarnation, which, by the way, is not an accepted idea within Judaism per se, but is an important teaching within Kabbalah. And part
Thank you.
of it is for just that reason, which is that energy, after you die, that energy doesn't disappear, it continues.